A powerful billionaire disguises himself as a poor bus conductor to test true love, only to discover a girl whose loyalty changes his life forever. Before watching, subscribe my channel. He had everything, except someone who loved him for who he truly was. The city sparkled beneath the night sky, glowing with endless lights, luxury cars, and towering buildings that whispered power and success. At the very top of it all stood a man who owned more than most could ever dream of. Expensive suits, private jets, grand offices, his world was built on wealth. People admired him, respected him, even feared him. But deep inside, he felt nothing. Every morning began the same way. Assistants rushing in with schedules, business calls filling every minute, meetings where people smiled too much and agreed too quickly. Every word spoken to him sounded polite, but empty. Every compliment felt rehearsed. Every relationship seemed calculated. He wasn't blind. He could see it in their eyes, the greed, the expectation, the silent calculations. To them, he wasn't a man. He was an opportunity, a name, a bank account. And slowly, that realization started to break something inside him. Late one evening, he stood alone in his massive penthouse, staring out at the city below. The glass walls reflected his image back at him, a powerful CEO, yet a lonely soul. What was the point of all this, if no one truly cared? The silence around him felt heavier than ever. No laughter, no warmth, no one to share even the smallest moment with. Just success and emptiness. He thought about the people in his life. The women who had come close, the friends who stayed around, but every memory carried the same doubt. Did they ever love him, or just his money? If I lost everything tomorrow, would anyone still stay? That question echoed in his mind, louder than anything else. And in that moment, something shifted. He didn't want admiration anymore. He didn't want fake smiles or perfect words. He wanted something real. Something pure. Someone who could see him, beyond the wealth, beyond the title. But how could he ever find that in a world that already knew who he was? The answer came to him slowly, but clearly. He had to disappear. Not completely, but enough to remove everything that made people treat him differently. No luxury, no status, no power. Just him, as an ordinary man. It was a risky idea. A bold one. Maybe even foolish. But it was the only way to know the truth. With quiet determination, he turned away from the window. For the first time in years, his eyes held something different. Not confidence, not control, but hope. A hope to be loved for who he truly was. And that night, the billionaire made a decision that would change his life forever. Sometimes, to find real love, you have to hide everything that makes you powerful. Please subscribe my channel. To find real love, he had to become someone no one would ever notice. The transformation did not happen overnight. For a man who had spent years surrounded by luxury, stepping into a simpler life required more than just changing clothes. It meant letting go of an identity the world recognized. In a quiet room, far away from his towering office and polished image, he stood in front of a mirror. The expensive suit was gone. In its place, he wore a plain shirt, slightly worn trousers, and simple shoes. His perfectly styled hair was now unkempt, his sharp appearance softened into something ordinary, almost invisible. For the first time in years, no one would look at him twice. He studied his reflection carefully. The man staring back at him didn't look like a billionaire CEO. He looked like someone the world would overlook without a second thought. And that was exactly what he needed. With careful planning, he arranged everything in secret. His company would continue to run without him, his absence explained as a long business trip. Only one trusted person knew the truth, but even they couldn't fully understand why he was doing this. Because how could they? Why would a man who had everything choose to live like he had nothing? But for him, this wasn't about losing everything. It was about finding something he had never truly had. Soon, the next step began. Through quiet connections and unnoticed arrangements, he secured a job as a bus conductor. It was a world completely different from his own. No luxury, no comfort, just long hours, crowded spaces, and endless faces passing by without recognition. The air was filled with noise, the streets alive with movement, and for the first time, he was just another man trying to get through the day. On his first morning, as he stepped onto the bus, there were no greetings of respect, no one waiting to impress him. Just ordinary people, lost in their own lives. And strangely, it felt real. He watched as passengers boarded, workers, students, families, each carrying their own struggles, their own stories. No one cared who he was, because to them, he was no one important. And in that moment, he felt something unfamiliar. Freedom. This is what it feels like, to be seen as just a human being. The day was not easy. The work was tiring, the environment harsh, and the respect he once received was replaced with indifference, sometimes even impatience. But he didn't complain. Because for the first time, every interaction felt honest.
No fake smiles. No hidden intentions.
Just real people, living real lives. As the bus moved through the busy streets, he stood quietly, observing everything around him. Somewhere deep inside, a small sense of hope began to grow. Maybe, in this simple world, he would finally find someone who could love him without knowing who he really was. But would anyone ever truly care for a man with nothing? He didn't know the answer yet. But he was ready to find out. Sometimes, you have to lose your identity to discover your true worth. Please subscribe my channel. In a world that ignored him, she chose to see him. It was just another ordinary morning on the bus. The air was heavy, the seats were crowded, and people rushed in with tired faces and impatient voices. He moved through the aisle, collecting fares, barely noticed by anyone. Some passengers avoided eye contact, others spoke to him without even looking at his face. To them, he was just a bus conductor. Invisible. The bus stopped at a small corner, and a young woman stepped in quietly. There was nothing flashy about her, no expensive clothes, no signs of wealth. Just a simple dress, soft eyes, and a calm presence that somehow felt different from everyone else. She looked around for a moment before gently taking a seat near the window. As he approached her for the fare, he expected the same routine. A quick transaction, no words, no connection. But instead, she looked up at him. Not through him. Not past him. At him. Her eyes met his with a softness he wasn't used to. There was no judgment, no impatience, just quiet respect. "Good morning," she said gently, offering the fare with a small smile. For a brief second, he froze. No one greeted him like that. No one smiled at him like that. He took the money slowly, almost unsure how to respond. "Good morning," he replied, his voice softer than usual. It was such a small moment, but something about it stayed. As the bus continued its journey, he found himself noticing her again. She thanked him when he handed her the ticket. She moved slightly to make space for an elderly passenger. She didn't complain about the crowd or the noise. There was a quiet kindness in everything she did. And it was real. Why does this feel so different? He couldn't understand it, but he could feel it. For the first time since he had started this life, someone wasn't treating him as invisible, or as someone beneath them. She was treating him like he mattered. The next day, she boarded the same bus again. And the day after that. Each time, the same gentle smile. The same respectful tone. Sometimes a few simple words, sometimes just a quiet nod, but always the same warmth. Slowly, those small moments began to mean something more. He started waiting for her stop without realizing it. His eyes would search for her in the crowd. And when she stepped in, something inside him felt lighter. Was it possible that such a simple person could make such a deep impact? One afternoon, as the bus slowed down, she noticed he looked tired. Without hesitation, she spoke softly, "You should take care of yourself. You look exhausted." No one had said something like that to him in years. Not for him, but for his well-being. He looked at her, slightly surprised, and for the first time, there was a faint smile on his face. In that moment, surrounded by noise and chaos, something quiet and beautiful began to grow. A connection built not on status, but on sincerity. And deep inside, he realized something he had never felt before. Someone had finally seen him, not for what he had, but for who he was. Sometimes, the purest hearts recognize value where the world sees nothing. Please subscribe my channel. Sometimes, the simplest moments create the deepest love. Days turned into weeks, and what once felt like coincidence slowly became something neither of them could ignore. She continued to take the same bus, at the same time, almost like an unspoken routine had formed between them. And without realizing it, He began to wait for those moments more than anything else in his day. Their conversations were never grand or dramatic. They spoke about small things, how tiring the day had been, how crowded the city felt, how life didn't always go as planned. Yet, in those simple exchanges, there was a comfort he had never experienced before. One evening, the rain poured heavily outside. The streets were flooded, and the bus was unusually quiet. She stepped in, slightly drenched, trying to hide her discomfort. Without thinking, he offered her a dry cloth kept near his seat. She hesitated for a moment, then accepted it with a soft smile. "Thank you, you're always kind." Those words stayed with him. Kind. No one had ever described him like that before. As the journey continued, she spoke more openly than usual. She talked about her struggles, her responsibilities, and the small dreams she carried in her heart. There was no shame in her voice, no desire to impress, just honesty. He listened quietly, every word sinking deeper than he expected. Why does being with her feel more valuable than everything I own? For the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to control anything. He wasn't leading conversations or making decisions. He was simply present. And it felt peaceful. Days passed, and their bond grew stronger. Sometimes she would bring an extra snack and insist he take it, even when he refused. Sometimes she would wait a little longer after her stop, just to finish a conversation. And sometimes, they would share a quiet silence that said more than words ever could. It wasn't just kindness anymore. It was connection. One day, as the sun set softly across the city, she looked at him and said, "You know, even though your job is hard, you always seem calm. I think that's rare." He smiled faintly, but inside, something shifted. No one had ever seen him this way before, not as a powerful man, not as someone important, but as someone steady, someone human. Could something so simple really be this meaningful? He began to notice how her presence changed him. The stress he once carried felt lighter. The emptiness that once followed him everywhere slowly faded. In its place, there was something warm, something real. He was falling for her. Not because she admired him, but because she understood him, without even knowing who he truly was. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of losing everything. Because in her presence, he felt like he had already gained something far more valuable. Sometimes, true love is built not on grand gestures, but on quiet moments that touch the heart. Please subscribe my channel. When the world stood against her, would her love still stand strong? It started with whispers. At first, they were small, almost harmless. People at her workplace, neighbors, even distant relatives began to notice her frequent rides on the bus. And soon, those innocent observations turned into judgmental questions. Why are you always talking to a bus conductor? Do you even know who he is? People like him are not meant for someone like you. The words didn't come from one place, they came from everywhere. And slowly, they began to weigh on her. One afternoon, as she returned home, her closest friend stopped her with a concerned look. "You're a kind girl, but don't lose yourself in something that has no future. He is just a conductor. Think about your life, your status." She stayed silent. But silence doesn't always mean absence of pain. Inside her heart, confusion began to grow. She remembered his kindness, his calm presence, the way he listened without judgment. But now, those memories were being challenged by the world around her. Am I wrong for caring about someone so simple? That question echoed in her mind again and again. The next day, she boarded the bus as usual. But something felt different. The usual warmth in her smile was replaced by hesitation. She looked at him, but quickly turned away, as if unsure whether she had the right to feel the way she did. He noticed it immediately. Her laughter was quieter. Her eyes avoided his for longer than usual. Even her voice carried a weight she couldn't hide. Something had changed. But he didn't know why. Days passed, and the distance between them slowly grew, not in space, but in emotion. She still came, still sat in the same place, but the connection that once felt effortless now felt fragile. One evening, she didn't speak at all. As she got off the bus, she paused for a moment, then left without looking back. That silence hurt more than words ever could. Inside her home, the pressure grew stronger. Family expectations, societal judgment, and constant reminders of what she should choose began to surround her like walls closing in. You deserve better. You cannot build a future with someone like that. She sat alone in her room that night, staring at nothing, torn between two worlds. One was simple, but real. The other was accepted, but empty. If I choose love, will I lose everything else? Her heart trembled under the weight of that choice. And somewhere across the city, he stood unaware of the storm forming around the only person who had ever made him feel truly seen. Because sometimes, love is not tested by distance, but by pressure from the world that refuses to understand it. True loyalty is revealed when love is no longer easy, but still remains. Something had changed. The poor conductor she loved was never poor at all. The city that once felt ordinary suddenly felt heavier that evening. The bus had stopped at its usual route, but something was different in the air, like the world itself was holding its breath. Passengers had already left, and the noise of the day slowly faded into an unusual silence. He stood near the empty aisle, no longer the same man he had been for weeks. She was there too. But this time, she wasn't smiling. She wasn't speaking. She was simply standing still, as if waiting for something she feared but could not avoid. His hands tightened slightly. For the first time since this journey began, he wasn't ready to hide anymore. He had seen her struggle. He had seen her distance. And he had seen the pressure the world placed on her heart. And now, he knew it was time. With a slow breath, he stepped forward. The bus conductor uniform no longer felt like protection. It felt like a mask that had lasted too long. His eyes met hers, steady but filled with emotion. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. Her heart skipped slightly, unsure of what was coming next. The silence stretched. And then, everything changed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple item, one that didn't belong to a bus conductor. It was a keycard, engraved with a name she had never expected to hear in this moment. A name tied to power, wealth, influence. The same name she had only seen in newspapers and business headlines. Her breath caught. No, it couldn't be. He looked at her with calm honesty and said, I was never just a conductor. The world around her blurred. Her mind refused to process the words. The man she had shared simple talks with, the man who listened to her struggles, the man she had slowly started to trust, was a billionaire. A powerful CEO. Her legs felt weak as the truth sank in deeper and deeper. Was any of it real, or was I just part of a test? Her voice trembled, but she couldn't speak. He stepped closer, his expression filled not with pride, but with fear. Fear of losing her. I didn't want you to love my name, he said softly. I wanted to know if you could love me, without it. Tears gathered in her eyes, not just from shock, but from the weight of everything she had believed in. The kindness, the conversations, the emotions, the bond. Was it all real, or just an illusion built on a hidden truth? She took a step back, overwhelmed. Around them, the world felt too large, too loud, too confusing. And for the first time, he stood not as a powerful man, but as someone waiting to be forgiven. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't just change everything. It shakes the heart before it understands it. In the end, love wasn't about money, but the heart that never changed. The silence between them felt heavier than any words could carry. She stood still, her emotions tangled in confusion, shock, and something deeper she could not name. The truth had shattered everything she thought she understood, but not everything she had felt. He didn't move closer. He didn't try to force an answer. He simply waited, his eyes filled with quiet fear, not of losing his identity, but of losing her. The world around them faded. The bus, the lights, the noise of the city, all of it felt distant now. Only the two of them remained in that fragile moment. She slowly looked up at him. Not at the billionaire. Not at the CEO. But at the man she had spoken to every day. The man who listened. The man who noticed her silence. The man who made ordinary moments feel meaningful. Her voice trembled as she finally spoke. So all this time, it was you? He nodded slightly. Yes. A long pause followed. Her eyes lowered, and for a moment, it seemed like she might walk away. Like everything between them might break right there. But then something unexpected happened. She smiled faintly through her tears. Not because everything made sense, but because her heart remembered something the truth could not erase. "I don't care who you are," she said softly. His breath stopped. She stepped closer, her voice breaking but honest. "I never loved your name, or your money. I loved the way you made me feel like I mattered." A tear slipped down her cheek. "So was any of this ever real, or was it the most honest thing I've ever felt?" Her answer came from her heart before her mind could stop it. "I fell in love with you, when I thought you had nothing." His eyes softened instantly. For the first time since the revelation, the fear in his expression began to fade. She reached out slowly, not to the billionaire standing before her, but to the man she had known in silence and simplicity. And in that moment, everything changed. He gently took her hand, as if afraid she might disappear.
No bealt. No titles. No disguise.
Just two hearts finally meeting without fear. The distance between them dissolved into something real, something unspoken, something stronger than everything that had tried to break them apart. And as the evening light softened around them, he realized the truth he had been searching for all along. She wasn't a test of love. She was the answer. Because true love doesn't grow from status. It grows from sincerity that survives every truth. Please subscribe my channel.